Hello, everyone, and welcome to AMA Global Marketing SIG and Texas A&M Cyber joint webinar. This is our first as AMA Global Marketing SIG webinar. And my name is Goksel Yalcinkaya. I will be the host for today. I'm a professor here at University of New Hampshire. We are just 1 hour north of Boston. And I will be the host for this event, and I'm the chair of the AMA Global SIG as well. So before we start, I just would like to provide just a little bit of information who we are as a AMA Global Special Interest Group. We are one of the oldest and the largest active special interest group within the AMA. We have over 500 members. We hold conferences every year in different parts of the world that you would like to be in. We had conferences in Havana, Cuba. We have conferences back in Buenos Aires, Argentina. We have conferences in Crete and Santorini, Greece. And then we have conferences in Taormina, Italy as well. And then we are holding a conference this year in Santiago, Chile, one of the beautiful cities back in South America. So please, look at our website, and then there are a lot of information in terms of special events and the conference that we do. Within each conference, we have our doctoral consortium as well. We put a lot of emphasis on our doctoral students too. And then that's part of the conference. Just prior to conference, we have that event as well. So that was the marketing pitch for us. So since it's an international marketing webinar. So without further ado, let me just switch into our speakers, and then let me just introduce them. We invite 3 distinguished editors from top journals in the international marketing field. Our editors will discuss some of the key trends, topics, and issues within the international marketing research, as well as providing some insights for us for the best practices for publishing. So, our format is very simple, and we are going to provide enough time for each presenter. There will be a short presentation, and then followed by moderation coming from me, and then we'll come up with the discussion and then Q&A sessions as well. So our first presenter is Kelly Hewett. She's the editor-in-chief for Journal of International Marketing, our own. JIM is a peer-reviewed journal. As you know, it's solely dedicated to advancing international marketing practice, research, and theory. It was established back in 1993. Tamer Çavuşgil was the first and the founding editor for the journal. And ever since, it's an upward trajectory that's taking place with the journal. So this is Kelly's second term as editor, and Kelly is the Regan Professor of Business and Haston Family Faculty Research Fellow at the University of Tennessee. Thank you for joining us today, Kelly. And then we have John Cadogan. He's the editor-in-chief for the International Marketing Review since 2014. His involvement actually date back even further with the journal, with the different capacities and all the rest. John is part of the Loughborough University faculty since 2003. IMR was established back in 1983, and then it really provides a great platform for the international marketing researchers for various ideas. And it's another premium outlet for international marketing scholars to disseminate their knowledge. And then our last presenter for the day is David Griffith. David is the Hallie Vanderheer Chair in Business at Texas A&M University. He's the current Global Marketing Area Editor for the Journal of International Business Studies and a former editor of the Journal of International Marketing. As we all know, JIPS is the top-ranked peer-reviewed journal in the field of international business, and then a part of the prestigious FT50 and then UT Dallas journalists. So JIPS was established back in 1970. So with that short intro, I would like to turn the table over to our first presenter, Kelly Hewett. Again, our chats and Q&A tools are open for you to ask questions to our editors. You can directly reach me as well, and then send your questions, and then I'll kind of populate them and then ask the editors as well. Kelly?
Thank you so much. Yours. And I also want to acknowledge Goksel and David for their roles in JIM as well. Goksel's a a member of the ERB, very important in helping me with the journal day to day. And David is on the advisory board. So you're getting kind of a suite of JIM representation here. And also thanks so much, Goksel, for arranging this and for all of you for tuning in. So our topic is publishing and global marketing, and I'm going to kind of lean toward the side of giving you ideas. So let's try to give you some tips on how to be successful. Not that I think I know everything, but I have some at least experience to share with you and advice. So I'm going to focus on three things. One, the importance of impactful ideas, and where in the international marketing domain I might suggest that you look to help generate ideas, what makes for an idea that is impactful and might be of interest to our community. I'll also just say a few words about the importance of the approach you take, what kind of data you use, and the methods you employ in your study. And then moving forward into the review process, the importance of being responsive in that process. So I'll start by talking about the process of generating impactful ideas in the global marketing research domain. And I'm going to talk about four different kind of broad areas that I see a lot of room for growth in. And I've seen some really interesting research, but I feel like there's way more potential in these areas based largely on events that are happening across the globe. So for example, let's consider some of these sorts of events. And so in the realm of digital communications, we have increased connectivity across countries. At the firm level, we have major consolidation of media companies around the world. We also have at the consumer level, variations in trust across digital channels and media, variation at the consumer level, but also variation across specific channels and firms and platforms that people interact with. In terms of trade relations, this is a continuous area where I believe we have a lot more to contribute. Let's think about some of the recent changes in the last decade or so. We had changes like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the US-China trade war as it was framed not that long ago. We have Brexit in the not so distant past, all impacting majorly the flow of trade around the world and decisions that international marketers make. And then the topic of institutional conditions might seem like somewhat of an old topic. We've seen it for a very long time, but I see this as an area that's still ripe for investigation. So think about issues like the progress in transitional markets over the last couple of decades and fluctuations in what's happening in different transitional markets. We also see changes in regulatory systems, allowing for greater protection of intellectual property, for example. We see numerous state-backed initiatives at the country level in emerging markets that are changing the way business is conducted and opening the door, or in some cases backtracking, that are impacting global marketing practice. And then lastly, an area that I will encourage anyone to seek opportunities to contribute to is this broad domain of environmental and societal concerns, or sustainability. We can put that term in there as well. So thinking about very big macro issues like concentration of wealth at the top of the economic pyramid and what this means for the bottom of the pyramid consumers, divergence in environmental policies across countries and how that impacts firms operating in multiple places around the world. So if we think about these issues happening around the globe, we can think about, for some reason, there we go. We can think about potential research domains. So for digital communications, for example, at the firm level, omni-channel promotion and distribution continues to be something firms struggle with, and then take that into the global arena and these factors these issues that are occurring in the global arena, and how does that impact firms' abilities to roll out omni-channel distribution globally. We still have questions about standardized versus customized strategies around the world, and thinking about access to data and consumer level data and the analytical tools that are available to us now. wide open field, I believe, for investigation. And I won't go through every one of these because we'll touch on some others, but I'll say a few words more about digital communications, just an idea of how you might frame a research question. And I've shown this slide before, I think, at least maybe once, so you might have seen it, but this is just an example of something that struck me. So if we look at around the world, this is the top 10 countries based on the share of retail e-commerce. So people who shop online in that environment. And we see China, it leads the way, and the US is number 6. And we can see the change up till 2022. But then if you overlay with that access to internet in these countries, we see some really interesting differences in these patterns. For example, we see, China is lowest on internet penetration, but highest on e-commerce. And obviously 56% is not small, but there's still significant variation. And so this introduces interesting questions like what factors impact these differences in patterns? Is it culture? Is it regulatory? Is it infrastructure? What is it? And at the firm level, how do firms roll out these kind of standardized distribution approaches around the world? So just feeding ideas. Let's move on to the broad topic of institutional conditions. So I mentioned emerging and transitional markets, and I'll just highlight that the growth projections are still very strong for emerging markets. And we can see here, for example, emerging and developed economies projected to grow at 4.4%, which is bigger than the global economy and bigger than the projections for advanced economies. And then if we consider that along with some of these state-backed initiatives that are taking place around the globe, these aren't new, but I believe they open the door to look at how such state-backed initiatives change the institutional playing field within a country, and how those institutions changes have also impacted the way firms operate in those markets. Again, just ideas for you to think big about where we can contribute. And then I'll talk a little bit about environmental and societal concerns. Let's look at the issue of how marketing decisions, even in one market, have significant impact globally, or can have significant impact globally. And so we'll take the issue of waste generation. We're good as marketers at getting people to consume. So this chart is showing the average per person per country waste generated. And if you want to know where we are, because this is very small, we are third, and this is OECD countries. So we per person generate the most waste. And then if we look at how waste generated in developed markets finds its way into less developed countries, it's quite scary. So in that left figure here, we see the result of our craving of fast fashion. We want the newest dress or the newest style of shoes every single year. And as marketers, we fall into that trap of we get the things in our email and we look in our closets and we find something we've worn once or twice. The average shirt is worn less than 1.5 times, I believe is the latest statistic I read. And this is a photo from the Atacama Desert in Chile, which we're going to be in, where the stuff gets literally dumped in the desert for people to pick through. But what happens with it is that it leads to chemicals in the environment and terrible environmental impact. And then on the right, we see plastic waste arriving on shore in the Dominican Republic. So what is marketing's role in helping curb this global impact of consumption? I think we have many, many things we can explore. And one of the most scary things is that the volume of global waste is projected to double to 2.3 billion tons by 2025. And if that doesn't scare someone into wanting to look into this, then we have a cynical group. I hope I see some papers. So one of the issues to think about is how marketing practice and policymakers bear responsibility, and there's this tension. So practices developed in one market have potential global implications and then can impact policy elsewhere. But also policymakers not only safeguard the interests of their own citizens, but they must monitor the impact of conditions in other markets on those people as well. And so I think this creates a really ripe area for us to talk about issues like privacy and security, for example. We're moving into this era where biometrics and technology is prevalent in retail and banking. And then we have policies responding, like the EU's GDPR. Concerns over biometric data is the issue there. So what are the implications for firms making more use of these sorts of data and their global strategies? And the global biometric market, by the way, is expected to top 50 billion by next year. So this is definitely not going away. And then finally, in that domain of sustainability, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, we see their impact on marketing strategies as they relate to product development and innovation and marketing practices aimed at consumption. For example, health and well-being and poverty, gender equality. All of these are themes that do appear in our literature, and I believe in the global research area under marketing, we have a lot more we can contribute. So those are my thoughts on some topics, and I'll just say a few words about the importance of not taking the shortcut. Look for the right method, the right data based on your question. That's my rule. I think first about the question, even if you get access to a data set, stop, think about the right way to analyze something based on a research question. What is the research question that's going to get traction in a journal, that's going to make a contribution, and then how you can use those data. And the goal there is to make sure that you are building confidence in what you are showing. Are you really able to say what it is you think you can claim? And one of the pieces of advice I'll give you here is to read the last several years of papers in the journal that you're targeting, to look for the expectations of that journal with regard to data and methods. There's going to be variation. If you go to JMR, you're going to have much stricter focus on methods and greater expectations for robustness checks, for example. And if you're coming to JIM, look at the expectation based on the standard of what's being published in that journal. That is my best advice for you with this regard. And then take the time to get it right. And then finally, once you enter the review process, my biggest advice is the first thing you do is listen to the editor. Read the editor's letter very carefully, because we as editors want to send you on the path to a successful revision. And we aim, I'm speaking, I think for most of us, to give you the signals that you can use to do a good job. And usually we rely very heavily on our AE's report and sometimes consult with them personally. But think of the AE's report as your roadmap, point by point by point, and make sure you're addressing them. Respond to every single point with either a response as to what you did, or a very clear rationale as to why it's something that either could not be done or should not be done. And don't overreact, and be cordial. Politeness will get you a long way, I think, whether you're on the reviewer side or the author side. So my concluding remark will be just to quickly mention that the Journal of International Marketing is sitting at that intersection of global marketing theory and practice. And if your work falls in that domain, we would love to have your submissions. And some things to look out for, some special issues that are coming out, the June 2023 issue. And I'm going to brag a little bit on Goksel and David for their fantastic paper that is in this issue, is on theory and practice in global marketing. And then we have 3 others for which the deadline has closed: global marketing in a diversified industrial economy. It's going to be a special section. Brands and branding in an international environment, and global selling and sales management. Those will be coming out sometime in the next year. And then we have one for which the call is still open, and that is on M&Es of transformative marketing approaches in an era of disruption. So if your work falls in that area, please go take a look at the call for papers. You have until November 30th. And with that, I will close and let our next speaker have the floor.
All right. Thanks so much, Kelly. Greatly appreciate that. Please write your questions to either in the chat or send directly to me, and I'm going gonna hold all the questions at the end once we have all the presenters present their cases. John, you're next. I'm gonna turn the microphone over to you if you're ready.
I certainly am. Hopefully that's coming through good and clear now.
Yes, it is.
Oh, great. That's good stuff. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm editor of IMR, the International Marketing Review, and yeah, I've been the editor for a number of years now, editor-in-chief. I kind of see myself as being just kind of a bit of a manager, really. I do edit some of the papers, but I actually hand most of my work over to a big body of associate editors who I think are the experts in the field. You know, there's a big world of international marketing out there, and I know a little bit about some of it, but I don't know everything about everything. And my associate editors, I hope, are the real experts in these, you know, some of these key areas. So just a little bit of background about it. IMR as a journal. It's a journal that is in its 40th year now. We're in our 40th volume, and we publish about 50 papers a year. So roughly, it depends. Obviously, it just really depends on what we get coming to us. So that's the goal, roughly, about that. Last year we accepted about 22% of papers. Now that's pretty good, I'd say. We had nearly 400 papers submitted, and so if you think about that, it's like 1 in 5 papers gets accepted, or got accepted last year, which is nice. Now, I reject about, you know, so every paper comes through me, I read every single paper and I look at it and I go, oh, what can I do with this? Is there any scope? Is there anything can I see something? If I think there's something there, I'll communicate. We talk, you know, there's a communication with the associate editor or an associate editor that I think might want to take this on. Sometimes the associate editors say, John, I don't know, I'm not sure about this. Maybe somebody else could take it. So there's a bit of a debate sometimes there. And if I think the paper's worth taking forward, I'll take it forward to an associate and pass it on to an associate editor, or I'll handle the paper myself. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to do that one. That looks great. I'm interested in that. So that happens. Average time to first decision last year was 51 days. We have a deadline of about 60 days, but if we can get it down, it'd be great. A lot of that time actually is trying to find reviewers, strangely enough, because we often have a set of review, you know, we want to get the right reviewers in place. So the actual review time is a lot shorter. I can't remember what it is now. I've got it in the background somewhere, but the review time is 20 something days, right? So reviewers turn papers around really quick. It's just trying to find the reviewers. You know, the reviewers are great. So if anyone wants to review for the journal, come, you know, don't be shy. Come forward. Sign up at IMR on the webpage and at Manuscript Central. So there's a little bit of background. Oh, now, so if you do submit a paper, some kind of international marketing review paper and I look at it and I'll say, right, okay, this is going to go to an associate editor. It's probably going to go to one of these characters, motley crew of associate editors. I'm sure that some of you recognize 1 or 2 of them here. Look, they're all specialists in a number of areas, and it's worthwhile just having a little look around and saying, okay, where do these people publish, right? Where have these people published recently? Because, you know, all these associate editors have got research areas that they've published on in the past, but not all of them are keen on handling papers, you know, constantly. For example, take Mark here, Mark Cleveland, right in the middle there. Mark Cleveland, poor old Mark, has to deal with all the papers that I get on consumer animosity. So he's like, God, if I see another paper on consumer animosity, I'm going to go, you know. So he's sort of head-butting the table as he's talking. That's not to say that consumer animosity is a bad topic to study, but far from it. It's just that it tends to be something that we tend to have a lot of submissions on, and Mark's published quite a bit on consumer animosity, and so he tends to get lumbered with those ones to look at. But other people have got other types of research they enjoy doing, and of course we've got some generalists as well across there. So when you think, I'm going to submit my paper, one of the things I always think to it's like, when I submit my paper, who's going to be managing my paper? Perhaps who's going to be managing it? What are they, and what do they think? What sort of methodologies do they favor, or how are they going to, what sort of criticisms are they going to raise? What are their sort of benchmarks and all sorts of things like that? So it's always worth having a little think about, who's going to be looking at my work. It doesn't just go into a black hole. Try not to think of this process as a black hole with some sort of a lottery ball, a ball bouncing around in the lottery machine here. Maybe it pops out and it's your number on it. No, that's not how publishing should be. Although sometimes it does feel like that. I have to say, I'm thinking about my own recent letters from editors. So have a little think about that, because what you're trying to do is have a conversation, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit, very briefly. You're trying to have a conversation with somebody, okay? And who are you going to have a conversation with? There's not many people you can have a conversation with until that thing's published. Right? So who are you going to have a conversation with? Initially with me, because I'm the initial gatekeeper, and then it's the associate editor, and then it's the reviewers. Okay, they're the only people that potentially are going to read your paper for 2 or 3 years, however long it takes for the damn thing to get published. So that's who you're having the conversation with. And it's just when you're writing it, who you're writing it for. Well, those are the people you're writing it for, probably right at the beginning. You're trying to have that sort of conversation. This is where I'm talking. This is an issue of importance. I'd like to have the conversation with you. So here we go. Have a look on our webpage, the International Marketing Review's webpage, and you'll see all of these people are sort of described and their institutions, and you can have a little flick through. We're just going to update the web pages actually, and I think we're all going to put our sort of our more current interests down, just to give people a little flavour of what we want, what we ourselves are currently interested in. So and that in itself, if you look at the current interests of people, you talk to Timo. What's Timo doing right now? Well, whatever Timo's doing right now, it's probably going to be quite an interesting topic to do some research on, is what I'd suggest. Have a little look and see what some of these people are doing, and say, okay, those are interesting. These people here that I've got on my computer screen there are pretty cutting edge in a number of areas. What are they doing? So there we go. This is how I run it at RMR. I read it. I'm the editor. I desk reject quite a lot. I think it was 45 or 47% in the last 12 months. That I carefully knock out of the park with a big bat. A lot of the time it's because the papers, nothing wrong with the papers per se, but sometimes the papers just don't address an international marketing issue, or don't address it with enough of a clear, international marketing is not central enough. And I think that's the thing that's important. Or for me, international marketing, it'd be different for David, is Gibbs, but for me, it's international marketing. Same for Kelly, I assume. International marketing has to have some sort of central role in there, and it's up to you to make that clear. Sometimes you think it's really clear, but it isn't. Well, I'm studying an exporting firm. Yeah, but if you took the word export out, would the paper change? Does the paper, does it make any? So just ask yourself those sorts of questions a little bit, because you need to be making that centering, as it were, the IM bit of the marketing. There we go. So I read them, I desk reject or assign, or I assign to an AE, and the AE then, when the AE gets it, associate editor gets it, they'll go, John, I don't think there's any legs here, and they might desk reject it as well. So it can get sliced off quite early, and then or the AE sends it out to reviewers. And I like 2 reviewers. I like 2 clean, good reviews. That's my preference. 2 clean, good reviews. It's 2. As an author, I hate it when I get 3 reviews, and one of them wants to go that way, one of them wants to go that way, and one of them wants to go that way. It's a 3-way fight. It's very difficult and it's difficult for the editor as well sometimes. For me, if I've got, well, how do I, as an editor, make a clean set of recommendations if I've got 3 very competing reviews? So I like to get 2 good reviews, and then my preference, as my personal preference, is to be able to make very, very clean decisions when I've got the reviews in. That's my personal philosophy as an editor. I get the reviews in and I say, great, this paper's going, I can see it, this is it, this is in. All they need to do is X, Y, Z, bang. That's a great paper. That's when I love it. Obviously, I was reading something on LinkedIn. I think it's yeah, who was it? I can't remember. It was a psychology professor sort of bemoaning the evolution of publishing over the last 2 decades, and how it's changed so much from being a case of submitting papers to it's Paul Spector. It was Paul Spector talking about how, you know, Spector's little green book on measurement. That's how I remember him. But how publishing has become, you know, so much jumping through hoops. And at the end of the day, has the paper changed so much? So my personal preference is to strip a lot of that down. Is the paper good enough to publish? That's what I'm looking for. So, but my AEs have slightly different philosophies, so they'll all deal with it a bit differently. But most importantly, what I'm trying to do is build a body of AEs who are clearly championing papers. If the paper's not going to get published, we don't want to keep it in the review process, you know. So hopefully, what that should lead you to thinking about is, well, okay, in that case, if I'm in the review process, I've got a chance. I've got a really good chance. And that's something to think about. I was thinking about what Kelly was saying. Kelly was showing all these great ideas, and I was thinking, oh wow, man, I could have done that. Yeah. So, but well, what I'll do is I'll switch sides, and I'll sort of start talking about how I see a sort of arc, a kind of arc. What are you doing if you're publishing in international marketing? And so I think, well, look, where can you, if you've got a paper, does it fit the international marketing journal like IMR on it? Well, if it's got the variables that are of importance, okay, that link in somehow, okay. So I think about, you know, international marketing variables as being things like, I don't know, consumer animosity, classic one, you know, loads of papers coming in on those sorts of things. Like Kelly, I think institutional features are still really important. I really like the contributions we can see. And by the way, these boxes should be overlapping. They should just be on top of each other, because most of the time you've got international variables, you've got international context, you might have international samples. There's all sorts of things going on there. But any one of these is it puts you in the ballpark, I think. We've got, you know, political and I like at the moment we're seeing sort of, you know, anti-global scapes. We're seeing you know, deglobalization issues. We've got all those tensions happening, which Kelly described in far more detail and nice and richly. I'm interested in those sorts of things as a personal, just you know, when I open the newspapers and I you know, click on the newspaper or whatever it is, and I like to see what's going on. I like to see the latest issues that are, you know, global in that sense as well as national. You've got context as well. Look, anything. So another angle is, look, if you're just talking about, doing business internationally, whether it be rolling out new products globally, or how do you coordinate international marketing? Are you going to have international product managers making decisions, or are you going to have, or is marketing going to be globally managed? I mean, those are questions which were out there 20 years ago, and they're still there needing to be thought about. I still read papers from 20 years ago and I go, nobody's answered those questions. Why are we, what great papers that you can open up a paper and go, brilliant, fabulous. I love that. Why hasn't anyone answered them? Those questions. So again, global marketing coordination issues. I mean, that's a classic paper from 2003 in Gibbs, Kimitel, which was lovely, but let's do some more work on it. The book wasn't closed in 2003. We've got export channel selection questions coming out now. There's a lot of work in Gibbs, I think, and JMS and all of those sorts of journals looking at market entry and operational features in a sort of big way, and that feeds into the international marketing quite clearly. I think that's a new area. Well, not a new area. That's a hot area, I think, which we're seeing more papers on. And then you've got the global samples. You've got all the normal stuff with when you've got multi-country samples. Anything where you're modeling culture as a variable, as an explanatory variable. I quite like to see some of the more exploratory work. I'd like to see more of that. So what you'll often get is somebody saying, well, I've got 3 countries and I'm seeing quite a lot of differences across these 3 countries. And rather than going, wow, like that, I'm going to test the theory across 3 countries. Well, I mean, that's like 3 data points, but at least, but you can use that for theory generation, for developing ideas. And I think that I like to see those sorts of bits of work. I mean, I was just looking at the numbers, and back in 2021, that is, we published 20% of our papers were qualitative studies. Last year it was only 5%, but so we're seeing quite a lot of variation in sort of what's qualitative and what's quantitative model testing stuff. But there we go. And then you've got the cross-national studies as well, pure cross-national, although actually you do see all the other stuff coming in. There's a great paper. I just thought I'd bang that one out as a fabulous paper from last year. A lovely cross-national study, which I thought was great. So there you go. Do you know what? I'll leave it there because I've talked far too long. I'll just leave that there, let that sit in everyone's view. I think that's me too. I can talk more later if you can try and stop me.
All right. Thanks so much, John. Excellent. Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Greatly appreciate that. Again, one more reminder, please write your questions into chat or send directly to me. And then we have a Q&A tool as well available for us within the Zoom. Let's utilize each one of those tools. So let me turn the table over to David, and then David will talk about some of the publishing opportunities within the GIBS.
Thank you, Goksel. I want to first say thank you to the AMA Global Marketing SIG for inviting the Journal of International Business Studies to this conversation. I think sometimes the IB focus, sometimes international marketing scholars don't sort of think about GIBS as an outlet. So what I want to do today is sort of just provide an understanding of GIBS. And, I recently took over as part of the editorial team, and I've learned a lot about the inner workings of GIBS. And so I wanted to share that as well with the audience, because I think that helps understand some of the approaches, or as both John and Kelly were talking about, especially John, but the strategy for the review process in and of itself, given the allocation issues. So the goal of the Journal of International Business Studies is to publish insightful, innovative, and impactful research in the field of international business. When you look at the aims and scope, I think, and I'm not going to go through all these, but I wanted to put this up because I think when people look at this, they're kind of overwhelmed. And so JIBS is an integrative international business journal. And so when you look at the aims and scope, if you go down this list, you really don't see where's marketing, where's my international marketing work going to fit. And this is really important from an understanding of when you submit your paper. John was talking about making sure that your work is clearly situated within the field of international marketing. I have submitted work to JIBS and I did not do that. And I did not get the international marketing reviewers. I got very different reviewers from a very different discipline with a very different research literature, which led to a very disastrous outcome for my paper because I didn't position it well. I didn't situate it within the international marketing. So if you're doing exporting and you submit an exporting paper to JIBS, we've got people in economics who do exporting. We've got people in marketing who do exporting. So really situating your work within the marketing discipline will aid you in directing your paper to the appropriate reviewer audience. There are 2 marketing area editors for JIBS under the current editorial team, myself and then Saeed Sami. Our area scopes are very, very similar. We both cover the full breadth of international marketing. The reason that there are 2 of us is the AIB, the Academy of International Business, is very interested in seeing an increase in the number of submissions to the journal. And so we are proactively making sure that we have the capacity in terms of both the reviewers and the area editors to support hopeful growth. I hope everyone is hearing me when I say hopeful growth. That means submissions. If we look at the history, the last 5 years of the Journal of International Business Studies, you can see that only 9% of published papers were in marketing and supply chain. So about 4 years ago, the AIB started to have a discussion on how to increase international marketing representation in the academy as well as within JIBS. And so there was a AIB task force on international marketing with a whole bunch of different outcomes or recommendations from that. And that is currently what we're operating under. And so you may know, if you're going to the AMA Global Marketing SIG conference in Chile, we'll be holding a paper development workshop there to sort of increase our connectivity with that crowd. JIBS, for those who are unfamiliar, is the top-ranked journal in the field of international business. We are on the FT Journalist, the Financial Times Journalist. We are ranked a 4-star in the World Elite by the ABS Academic Journal Guide, a 4-star journal in ABCD Journal Quality List, and we are a UT Dallas journal. We are considered an A at many schools. Our historical acceptance rate is around 6 to 7%. Which should not be a deterrent, hopefully. Our impact factor, when you look at JIBS compared to sort of what you would say is the marketing Big 15, if you will, we are, our 5-year impact factor is very high. If you look at our 2021 journal impact factor, I'd like to point you to the difference between the journal impact factor and journal impact factor without self-citations. JIBS maintains a very strict requirement that there are no more than two cited works within the last 3 years from JIBS. We do not want, so when you're submitting your paper, don't stuff it with recent JIBS papers. We will actually tell you to only cite at max 2 and only those that are directly applicable. We are highly cognizant of issues within the field. And we really want to, sort of make sure that we are advancing our journal as best we can in a very competitive set of elite journals. Recently, under the new editorship, we have added 2 new committees. We have added a Research Methods Advisory Committee. This Research Method Advisory Committee has expertise in both qualitative and quantitative methodologies. We are a journal that strongly is open to any research methodology, and we have the expertise. So if a paper comes in, we have reviewers who are familiar. Sometimes we have reviewers who are experts in qualitative methodology. Sometimes, given the diversity of qualitative methodology, we may not have someone. We reach out to the Research Methods Advisory Committee, and they help us with the assessment of the paper and how we could improve the paper if necessary. We also have a Societal Impact Advisory Committee for those papers that come in that are specifically targeted to many of the issues that Kelly was talking about, and the issues that we're hoping people address, which are these larger societal issues. We have a committee where we can reach out to them, and they'll come in later in the review process just to provide a few sort of, if you will, bullet points on how some of those societal impact aspects may be able to be heightened so that we can gain better traction with the journal. I've had many papers submitted to JIBS and desk rejected, and I learned why. Here's what happens at JIBS on the inside. So when we use what we call a decentralized reviewing process, so when you submit a paper to JIBS, it will be sent first to one of two reviewing editors. These reviewing editors are well-versed in what has been published in JIBS. They are well-versed in methodology as well, so they understand the standards of JIBS. They look at the paper for fit and quality assessment. John had mentioned that sometimes papers come into an international marketing journal that really aren't international, right? There's no international element to it. It's done in a different country, and therefore it's international. That oftentimes results in a desk rejection per se. So they're really looking at what makes this paper international. The reviewing editors will either desk reject the paper, they could recommend a desk rejection to the AE, or they could move the paper to the AE for evaluation. If they are moving the paper forward in the process, it goes to our editor-in-chief, Rosalie Tung from Simon Fraser University. And Rosalie looks to see if a author team has recommended an area editor. She also examines conflicts of interest, and she looks at what the overall workload balance is across her entire spectrum of AEs and those who are under the same keywords as the paper is submitted to. She will then reach out to us as an AE if we're a potential AE for the paper and ask us if there's a conflict of interest with the paper. If there is, she moves it to a different AE. If there's not, she'll assign it to the area editor. The area editor then will assess the paper and decide if the paper will be desk rejected or moved forward in the review process. And note that when the reviewing editor does the review, they do a pretty thorough review. So we actually get a half page or so review from the reviewing editor of their notes on the paper as it comes through the process. And also Rosalie will also often add 4 or 5 bullet points to that list. If we decide to move it into the review process, we assign reviewers, we manage the review process. We, as an AE, will decide on a rejection. If we do recommend a revision, we don't send the recommendation letter out. We recommend it to the editor that we wish for this paper to be given a revise and resubmit. She does a quick glance at the reviews, the letter, and then moves forward with giving a revision. And so that's sort of the process. So it's really important to, if you're going to submit an international marketing paper, to really position it within the international marketing literature, make international marketing the highlight of this, select the area editors that are international marketing so that we can move the paper appropriately within the process. In terms of what we wish to publish cutting edge research that breaks new ground. We are a premier journal. We're not looking for incremental contributions. We're not looking for a paper that takes a well-established relationship between two constructs and simply adds one of Hofstede's dimensions as a moderator. We're looking for things that are sort of pushing theory, extending international marketing theory, extending any theory within the international domain, as opposed to simply applying existing theory. The fundamental phenomenon has to be of interest to international marketing, and it needs to address important real-world global marketing problems. These don't have to be practical problems. These can also be scholarly problems that we're dealing with, or public policy problems. There's a really nice editorial I've placed on the screen of what makes a study sufficiently international. I would advise people who are new to JIBS to take a look at that. People who are familiar with JIBS are probably well aware of what it means to be sufficiently international. But her editorial, and it's been done a number of years ago, is a really nice piece. Oftentimes when we desk reject papers, we will recommend, if it is not international as the central element, we'll ask authors to review that before they develop the work further if they wish to resubmit it. In terms of methods, JIBS is a little interesting from the standpoint of, we expect the research to meet the contemporary methodological standards in the literature for an A-level publication. This, though, means the international business literature that you have to be familiar with, such as if you're using culture, you should be familiar with the framework of cultural assessment by Lenartzowitz and Ross. There's issues of international business endogeneity and how to deal with it. And so it is a different literature from maybe what you would find in marketing per se. There are some different issues that IB creates. We have if you're moving into the international business or international marketing literature, Frankie and Richie wrote a really nice piece that really looked at the number of countries you need to do cross-sectional or cross-national work. I have a piece in the Journal of International Marketing that I'm very proud of with Teresa Dean and Jessica Hopner on, sort of issues of using cultural distance and institutional distance within the international marketing literature. There's another excellent paper on dealing with common method variants in international marketing research that was also published in a special issue on methods in the Journal of International Marketing. We also have issues of sort of marketing and consumer psychology. So if you are doing work in sort of the international CB domain, there's a great paper that just came out on scale, use, and abuse, and an editorial by Katsakias and colleagues that really kind of looks at the international marketing elements and how we have to use these as we're moving through. It's in the Journal of Consumer Psychology. So from a methodological standpoint, we are looking at sort of, the same kind of rigor you would see at the Journal of Marketing or Journal of Consumer Research, et cetera. You're looking at, if you're doing sort of experimental studies, you're not just doing one experimental studies with 120 undergraduates and submitting it. That's not going to go very far in our journal, just like it wouldn't at JCP or at JCR or JM. So we're kind of looking at that methodological standards. The other thing I would say at this point is that we are completely open to methodological approaches, qualitative survey research, secondary research, but you have to execute it at the highest level. The old cross-sectional surveys, there are ways to do cross-sectional surveys where you are capturing your instrumental variables. You just have to plan ahead of time on how you're doing that so that you can actually try to tease out and meet the rigor that we're looking at, as well as engaging in multi-method research, a survey followed by an experiment, a survey that sort of mirrors some of the effects in publicly available secondary data, et cetera. All of these sort of contemporary standards that you would see at the A-level journals is kind of what we're looking for. In terms of topics, I loved what Kelly did, and I sat there much like John did and said, yeah, that would have been a great idea for me to do. And I actually thought about trying to redo my slides really quick, but I think a slightly different approach. There are a lot of great works in the field of international marketing. I mean, great works that summarize the literature, that look at what's been impactful. And yet this Samia and Chabowski bibliometric analysis of our literature. You've got Leonidas et al., who did a state-of-the-art marketing review. Naveen Danthu has been doing a number of bibliometric reviews. He did one of IMR, which really is a nice sort of highlights the tremendous findings of IMR and the knowledge contributions. We also saw him do this great work on Journal of International Marketing as well. And then we recently had a sort of a overview, a editorial on the overarching role of international marketing, where once again, they highlight some of the key knowledge nodes key literature areas within international marketing. The Journal of International Marketing wants to publish great research, and we are not topic focused. What we are we pushing the field forward? Hot topics are great, and many of the hot topics will be hot topics for the next 2 decades. But also some of the classic issues of cultural values or relationship marketing or marketing orientation. All of these are great topical ideas. What we're looking for, are you pushing theory substantively forward? And are you doing it in a most rigorous method? And obviously, I think all of us, and I know John and Kelly would echo these comments, we are all very much concerned about the replication crisis we're having in our discipline. And we want to make sure that the methods are as rigorous as possible so that we have confidence that these findings are factual and that they will impact the fields for years to come. So I'll leave you with just 3 key takeaways, hopefully. One is JIBS would like to increase the amount of international marketing research published in the journal and the number of international marketing scholars within the Academy of International Business. We want you to be part of the AIB community, and we want to be able to share your work through JIBS. We are open to any method, but we demand research meet contemporary A-level journal standards. And we are open to any substantive international marketing phenomena or problem. So with that, I will conclude and say I look forward to receiving your submissions at the Journal of International Marketing. And I will turn it over to Goksel, our host for the day.
All right, thanks so much, David. With your presentation, my understanding is JIBS is dying for our submissions, so we can submit it, and then should be an easier path for us to get published in JIBS. So
6 or 7% acceptance rate, I'm not sure I would say that, but I would say that we are, there was a time where JIBS, I think Kelly and I joined around the same time, and the IM community at the AIB was very vibrant at that time in the AIB. And then I think that the AMA did a really great job of building the international community within marketing. And IMR has done the same thing about building the strong community. And I think we saw sort of a loss of new members and interest in JIBS. And so, like I said, the AIB did put together a task force to say we want to re-engage the international marketing community. And I know Kelly's very familiar with that task force.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks so much. Again, please write your questions into the chat or directly send it to me. I have quite a number of questions in front of me right now, but more the merrier. So please add your questions in our tools within the Zoom. Let me start off asking a question coming from the Q&A. I think this will go to all 3 our panelists, because I think each one of you may take a kind of a slightly different position on this one. The question is, what is the best policy to publish in premier journal within each one of those journals? Anyone to take the question first, or should I just call on? John, it's yours.
Can you read the question again? Sorry, I just want to make sure.
The question is, what is the best policy to publish in premier journals?
I'll just go with it, and if I haven't answered the question, then you can always ping it back to me. But I think the best policy is that you've got to plug into a conversation. That's at least my journal. That doesn't have to be taking place in my journal in IMR. The conversation has to be taking place in the international marketing community, and you need to be that. So there has to be something that you're talking to, and so, for example, there may, even if International Marketing Review hasn't published any work on a particular theme, it's all, let's just assume it's all happened in Journal of International Marketing. Okay, that's fine, because it just so happens we're all part of the same community. So I'm happy to go, right, okay, brilliant. There's stuff that's been published in loads of other journals, there's a discussion happening, and then make that quite clear. That's the way to engage. It's quite difficult to say, oh, I've just got this brand new idea that nobody's ever done anything on ever before anywhere. You know, there has to be, you have to be, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants, as you say, and those giants have to be publishing now-ish somewhere, or have published somewhere. Going back to you know, as David said something along that, you know, about the conversations might have been 2 decades old, and I was talking earlier about, you know, 2 decades old papers that I read, and I think you look back at them and you think, blimey, Dave could write well back then, couldn't he? But what's happened there? Yeah, no. But seriously, there's some you've got these great papers, and plug into them, but make them contemporary as well.
Wonderful. Anything to add on?
I'll echo the one of the points that I made about reading the journals. I think whatever journal you're targeting, whether it be one of the 3 here or any good journal, use what's being published in that journal as sort of a to give yourself insight into one, the level of, you know, rigor and conceptualization and methodology, the frameworks, and to give you some framework for how to write a paper. You know, similar to John, when I get papers that are, you know, not really international or really or not even marketing, you know, it could have been avoided. The authors wasted time, in my opinion, if they had really just read the journal before they chose to submit. So if you have a goal of publishing in one of these journals, look at what's being published in them now, sort of to give yourself a guide as to what would be expected. So that's just one piece of advice that I would give.
I'll touch on a couple of points. One is to John's point. So at the last AMA Global Marketing SIG conference, Neil Morgan stood up. You know, everyone in international, or everyone in marketing and international marketing knows Neil Morgan. And Neil said that a lot of his top ideas come from a paper he read that was 20 to 25 years old, that was a great conceptual piece, but that now we have the data to finally test. And so it was a great way for him to build his ideas. And so I think John's point is keen on that, and also shows the value of going to the AMA Global Marketing SIG conference, where you get these nuggets of wisdom. I think that one of the challenges we've talked a lot about at the Journal of International Business Studies is, are people are they saying, oh, this work's never going to hit, and so they don't even send it. And so I think that at JIBS, I would say, once again, you don't just send anything. You know, we know what the contemporary standards are. If you've got good work, I think we are a top outlet for that work. And so try to limit the self-selection bias, if you will, within that. And the other thing I would note is that to publish at the premier journal is really, really important to truly understand the literature. I think we see a lot of papers get rejected because they would be what we would call old wine in new bottles. Someone has this new concept that's really, really cool, and one of our reviewers comes back and says, oh, wow, Warren Keegan wrote this exact thing in 1969 in the Columbia Journal of World Business at that time, which is now Journal of World Business. And so I think that, you know, making sure you understand the full depth of the literature, not just what's been published in the last 10 years, because I mean, we get the same thing at the Journal of Marketing, where someone will go, yeah, but you have to consider Lou Stern, what he wrote in 71, you know, so making sure you're truly understanding that the depth of the literature, I think, comes up a lot in the review process.
Right, wonderful, great, thank you. And another question coming from the Q&A. How much time do editors spend thinking about trade-offs between, one, pushing forward interesting theory, and second, rigorous testing? Are the trade-offs accepted at all, or is it the focus of both elements hitting the top standards?
Really happy to start on this one. I think that in JIBS, we do think about the trade-offs. Oftentimes if you're exploring sort of this emerging topic area, and we're going to have to make that trade-off because we want to see. I mean, this is an important topic. You look at some of Kelly's discussions on waste, right? And if you think about the international effects on these, sometimes you can say, yeah, we're not going to have the phenomenal data to actually test that. But the importance is so high. So I kind of look at it as a triangle of importance of the topic, theoretical development, and rigor. And there's no way you're going to be able to advance all of those. And so, you're willing to be more lenient on something that has higher theoretical value, but if something is a really well-developed literature stream, like in the field of marketing, transaction cost economics, or cultural distance in international marketing, the bar gets a lot higher as you're delving into those more well-trodden areas. So I do believe we always make the trade-off at JIBS.
I'll completely agree. In fact, I have numerous examples where I just found the idea so novel, so important, and felt that the theoretical part of the story was well developed, even if it were not necessarily the perfect data, but maybe the authors really had very little access to more than that. But if the paper's really well done, and I think makes an interesting contribution that we should all be talking about, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make as well.
Absolutely. The way I sometimes I argue this with discuss this issue with the associate editors is like, if let's push the door open for other people to come through, right? So if we publish this paper, it might not be, as you say, the perfect methodology to test that particular theoretical perspective. But what we're doing is we're opening the door for other people to come through and to start testing the little, the smaller bits, and to make a bigger door, and all of those sorts of things, right? Expand the room. It's like building a city. I'm thinking of Sim City here or something, but but you know what I mean. We just create new research areas and build and start new balls rolling. And sometimes to do that, there are trade-offs or compromises, and somebody has to be first. And we have to, and I think our job is to make sure that we facilitate that.
I will say, though, I'm just going to add real quickly. I have, one of those examples that's fairly fresh in my mind was a paper that ended up taking 5 rounds. So as an author, if the editorial team is giving you chance after chance, you have to keep in mind that they're on your side. If they really want that paper, don't think of, oh my gosh, another round and all this stuff I have to do. Think of it as they're giving me a chance. And so I think you have to be willing also to work with the editorial team to rise to the level that they are pushing you to. If they've already made that trade-off, then they've accepted that the idea is there and they want the paper. So just work through the review process in a very diligent fashion, because they are giving you that opportunity.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks so much. Another question, what is your thought on suggested reviewers? Do you use suggested reviewers or even accept them?
I don't.
You don't. What I'll usually do is if they give me 3 of them, I'll look at the records and the background of them, and I will pick at most 1. And if that one ends up not coming through, then that's it. But I will put no more than 1 recommended reviewer. I will choose the other 2 myself. And if their recommendation is someone who I don't think is qualified, or I don't think is a good fit, or it's somebody at their university or that kind of thing, then I won't use them.
I also take a look at who's being recommended. And I put it this way: if you're recommending someone, their literature should be seminal to what you're doing. If you've never cited them, but you're recommending them as a reviewer, it's a little more questionable, a lot more questionable, I would say. I think first thing I do is I read the paper when it comes in. And I already have a list in my head of who I would want to review. Then I do look to see if the authors have made any suggested reviewers. And if there's overlap there, I know I'm going to get all of the reviewers are going to be ethical and tell me if they've seen the paper, if they have a conflict of interest. And we do ask that in the process. We follow COPE at JIBS, which I know most journals do. And so we expect that. I would say the following, though, and this is more of from an author standpoint. You may be recommending reviewers that you have no idea of how they review papers. When I first became an editor many years ago, my eyes were opened, if you will, to certain people I knew in the field and sort of how you meet them at a conference versus how they are as a reviewer. And I'm not talking anything negative, but I mean, you get very different. And I feel uncomfortable sometimes that we don't disclose the stats of reviewers. I think it would be beneficial to authors if they could see how many papers this reviewer has reviewed, what's the time in review, what their recommendation rates are. I think that would be very, very beneficial. But if the authors had asked for a quality reviewer that's central to the work and there's no conflict, like Kelly noted, they're not co-authors, they're not at the same university, they're not your student or your advisor, you can see what we can do with that.
I can see the benefit of both of those approaches. As a journal, we do not ask authors to recommend reviewers. So some journals do. They say, who would you recommend from the editorial board as a reviewer, but we don't. And because we don't ask, I'm always, what are you suggesting? So in general, I don't. But every now and again, you get a letter that says something along the lines of, if you are looking for reviewer suggestions, here are some. And it very much depends on the tone, and as you say, are they central to the work? I mean, are you saying, look, I'm quite sure of my work here, and I don't mind getting, this person, this bit of work being read by people who are really, really knowledgeable. Then yes, you'd say, well, great. Are they going to be able to? Going back to your point, David. People recommend reviewers, and they literally, you're right. I always think it's a toss of a coin sometimes, because you can recommend a reviewer, but who knows? Not all reviewers are friendly. They might be smiley people outside the review process, but not necessarily inside the review process. So, I mean, we're all, I think, everyone can be quite snappy or a little bit aggressive when they, they say the pen is mightier than the sword, don't they? People, when they write, can be really, really quite aggressive, as most authors will know when they receive reviews back. They kind of, well, gosh, that was harsh. You didn't have to see it that way. You didn't have to look at it that way. All that sort of stuff. So, sometimes it may well be just better to let the editors make choices if that's the option.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, guys. Another question coming from the Q&A. What is your position of the samples coming from MTurk? Because there are some reviewers who are very critical of this source, if there's a growing number of editors who accept them.
I'll just say if they are appropriate for the study for which they were used, I don't have a problem with it. I think that, let's just throw any question at a sample of MTurk, it just doesn't make sense. But, if it's the kind of question that you can argue that a set of MTurk respondents would not be inappropriate, we don't have a bias against. I guess is the easiest way to say that.
I think from my standpoint, I don't, it's kind of like, back in the late 90s, I was talking to Bob Lush, who is the editor of the Journal of Marketing. And I said, well, what about student samples? And he said, oh, there are some reviewers who don't accept student samples. And so I think you're always going to get an element of that. I think for the Journal of International Business Studies, I would say much like JCR or JCP, we are open to MTurk studies. Samples. Prolific is sort of a new one that a lot of people are sort of leaning towards. But, you know, if you're doing 3 studies, we'd like to see one of them pre-registered, and then we'd also like to see some sort of, you know, an attempt at a field experiment or something else to validate the external validity of that. So I'd say we're open to it. We don't publish many per se, but it's not because it's like we don't want MTurk, but, you know, at the contemporary A-level standard, it's not just MTurk that will get into any of the major journals. It's got to be, you know, a little more broad, if you will, on how things are being tested.
Yeah, I think there's a certain, these are issues that I tend to leave the associate editors to handle, and the reviewers are often pretty sharp on these issues as well. And they'll be asking questions about the appropriateness of the sampling, the samples, and the data sources. So you'll see MTurk published in IMR. Yeah, definitely.
All right, wonderful. Another question. I think you guys kind of touch upon this, but you know, it's in front of me, so I'll read it anyways. Does your journal accept qualitative research? Meaning that, is your journal receptive to qualitative research? David, you talked about that.
I've still got the mic on, so I'll just carry on. But
Go ahead.
As I said earlier, we definitely last year I think we only published roughly three qualitative papers out of, say, 50-ish. I don't know how many it was, 51, 50. But the year before it was 20%. So, you know, there are a whole bunch, and then the year before that, some. I like qualitative papers and conceptual papers as well. Obviously, hey, we'd all like more of them. But I like qualitative work. I think it's great. I've got lots of associate editors who appreciate qualitative research. We've got lots of editorial board members who are very, very strong in qualitative research, and there's a tradition of doing really great qualitative research in international marketing. There just is. So I think, and international, and also the intersections with international marketing, where it intersects with other fields, you get lots of qualitative research taking place there. So absolutely, the more the better.
We publish qualitative research. It's kind of the same issue. It has to be the appropriate method for the questions that you're examining. So I think it's about, you know, rigor. Is it well done? Is it appropriate for the particular question or problem you're examining? And then absolutely, if you can answer those questions with the yes, then absolutely we'd be happy to consider it.
I was just going to say the same thing and sort of highlight Kelly's earlier point, which is it appropriate for the research question? I think, you know, one of the things I've seen at the journals is a work that comes in, a qualitative work that comes in, says, oh, this is grounded theory to build a model, but it's in an area where we have 40 years of research. And so the question is, how is this appropriate to build a new theoretical model in an area that we already have a theoretical model? And so I think that there are great qualitative works out there in international marketing and in marketing more mainstream, but it has to be an appropriate question that can be answered with it, and then it has to be rigorously executed. It's not, oh, my friend worked for this company, so I did this case study qualitative with this company, which I had access to. When we send it out for a review, the reviewers are experts in the method, and things such as why this company, what sample selection in the qualitative domain becomes highly important.
All right, it seems like it's a green light for the qualitative research for all 3 journals, as long as it's appropriate for the research questions and rigorously executed. Okay, we got that. All right, another question coming from the chat. After publishing, given the overload of data out there, how can we increase the awareness of and the citation of our IM research beside the LinkedIn and all the other tools, social media tools? Any recipe for that?
I'd like to know the answer as well.
Me too.
Here's
Yes,
my
I'll say I'm fortunate that the JIM is under the AMA umbrella and work with Sage Publishing, who actually publishes the journal, and they provide a number of resources to us to help publicize the work. And I think they do a very good job. I think that's helped the impact factor of the journal, just having Sage and the AMA behind it. They put out not just LinkedIn, but on their website and other opportunities to publicize work. But the other thing that authors can do to help is leverage your university resources. And I think I have one example where I was on the not so great experience side of this. One of my co-authors, Roland Rust at Maryland, we worked on a paper together. He got interviewed by the New York Times, and I got interviewed by some local paper in Knoxville. So I don't think that I did a great job, or the University of Tennessee did a great job on that particular incident, but Roland certainly did. So I think the onus is partly on us as authors to take advantage of any opportunities that we can find, whether it be through the, outside the journals, in our own universities, through our own networks, but do understand that the journals want those citations and want those articles to be, highly read and used as well. And so we're doing whatever we can to the best of our abilities to make that happen.
I'll make 2 points to this, and this is one, beating a drum that I've beaten before, and then one is a new ask of the AMA Global Marketing SIG. So the first thing that I've talked about this before in other venues, that I don't think we as an academic and international marketing academic community do a phenomenal job of pushing ideas we see that we like out. And I'm not speaking of our own ideas. I'm speaking of when you read a paper in the Journal of International Marketing and you think it's really cool, we don't do anything with it other than sort of, we read it and maybe we'll cite it, but we don't share it more broadly. I'm not a fan of, we all do this through LinkedIn, of course. Oh, here's my new publication. We all do that, and people, like it. I muted myself there. But they never read it. But another thing is, I don't think many of us want to be pushing our own research that much, to be honest with you. I think we're kind of embarrassed to do that. And we hope our university would do that, or we hope the journal would do that. But I do think that there are opportunities for organizations such as the AMA Global Marketing SIG to push out research to its members. The issue always has been with any, the Academy of International Business, for example, the AIB right now is with the task force. We are pushing a number of papers that have been published over the last 5 years in JIBs in each discipline to people in those disciplines. Directly through email pushes and things like that. But I do think that that's something that we need an organization to do this, so we're not doing it for ourselves. But it would be good to push those out. And I think, I've served on a number of award committees, and it's sort of the antipathy. No one nominates people for awards, etc. And I just think we're not an engaged community. And so I think there's a community element to it, but there's also an association element to it. Because if we're not advocating for our discipline of international marketing, we will simply get smaller and smaller. Because I will say, consumer behavior does a very good job of pushing their research out at the journal level, at the AMA consumer behavior SIG level, at the EMAC consumer behavior group level, etc. So I think we need to do a better job.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And another really good question coming from the Q&A. Are there any analysis methods or types of data that will lead to a definite desk reject at your journal? It's kind of no, regardless.
Yeah, I bump PLS papers.
For me, it's the majority of the desk rejects are papers that are not truly international. David and John both have talked about this. So some of them will be, it was a study in a country in the Far East that's not a major Western country, but it's really has no international variables. It doesn't compare anything. It's not cross-cultural or cross-national in any way. And that's the vast majority of the desk rejects that come through. The others are papers that are simply underdeveloped. Maybe they're 15 pages. They were written for a class or submitted to a conference and someone just took a chance or doesn't really, maybe they're new to their student and they're new to the publishing process. So I think again, my advice about reading the journal to see what the expectations are, and that's part of my feedback I give is it's just paper's just not developed enough for submission at this time. The idea is it's not the idea, it's that the paper's not developed enough. So those are the two things.
I would say no. I think our reviewing editors do a very good job. I mean, I remember a paper that came in. The reviewing editor said this, it's an interesting paper, but they're using this. And they pushed it to me and I said, look, that's the standard at JCP. I'm fine with it. And we moved it into the review process. So I think that there's good communication within our journal and we're looking at rigorous standards. And so we don't have anything specifically that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify a little bit there. I'd say desk reject is probably the wrong way of describing it. I would say that I will push it back to the authors. Sometimes sometimes I will say, okay, look, this associate editor is really clued up, knows exactly what's going on with this particular type of methodology. I'm happy to let them manage that process. They'll know that there are problems with the methodology. And they'll pick it up, but I like the ideas and I'd like to see how, so we'll push that out. But sometimes I'll say, hang on, I've seen something here I'm not sure about. I'd rather, before it goes out to an associate editor, I'd rather just send it back to the authors and say, can you just do some extra work, potentially. So for example, I don't publish, sometimes they slip through in the review process, but I tend to not publish papers that use PLS methodology because for a variety of reasons, which I've published on, and you can see those online if you want. I don't use and I don't appreciate work that uses the PLS because I think PLS just creates junk data and output. So that's something I'll say. Well, look, if this is true, what you're saying, then it should work using other analysis approaches as well. So show us that it works using another analysis approach that doesn't always run. So that's one thing. I also struggle with higher orders and composites, and everyone knows me, so they who knows that sort of stuff. I tend to say I don't think they're real things a lot of the time. And I'm quite keen that we study real things, stuff that's real. So that's where I struggle. I don't know what that is. I don't know why have you added up 3 knives, a fork, and a plate, and called it X capability. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how I'm supposed to use the finding that adding up 3 knives, a fork, and a plate, it correlates with something. I don't know. So why don't we just sort of really open up what's going on there? Sorry, Dave.
No, and I agree, John. I think that the issue to me is one of robustness, and I sort of said this before. It's, are we actually publishing things that are true, right? Is there fact there? And so in the review process, you will almost always be asked to engage in alternative methodologies. Not just robustness testing, but to Kelly's point about making sure that you use the right method for your research question, it's also making sure that you use the most appropriate method, not just one that works, but you're using the best method, and you will be pushed at all 3 of our journals in terms of using the appropriate research method. And a lot of times when they come back and you're using seemingly unrelated regression, and they come back and they say, no, use GMM, you at least have to put it in the reviewer notes that you did it, and you're looking for consistency of findings.
I want to mention one thing that hasn't come up, but from time to time, I'll end up desk rejecting a paper because, as many of you know, the journals all have automatic checks for plagiarism. And it does happen from time to time. And it ranges from, 20% of the paper, excluding the references, is taken from other sources without proper citation, directly copying the text, to I've had as much as in the 70s, near 80%. So I'm just going to say, if there's anybody listening, watching that has not yet checked their work before submission, we all make minor errors in paraphrasing from time to time. But it doesn't sit well with editors. It certainly doesn't sit well with reviewers if it gets through and one of them finds it. So we do look at that, and you can save yourself some embarrassment by putting, most of you at your universities probably have software to check student work. You can put your own work through those kinds of filters, turn it in, or there's several of them now. So I just thought I would mention that, since it has not come up, and it might just not have occurred to you to do that with your work. And I would encourage you to do that.
All right, we have quite a number of other questions, but our time is up. I just want to be very respectful for everyone's time over here. I would like to thank you all three, our panelists, and then all the attendees for this webinar. Thanks so much. And it was very insightful. Thank you for taking time off from your busy schedule and being with us. Thanks, everyone. So see you next time.
Thanks, Goksel.
Thank you.